everyone, this is Grandmaster Miguel Santos and welcome to the chapter 1 of 100 winning strategies, where we are going to learn how to restrict the pieces of our opponent with our pawns. Of course, there is many different ways to do this during a game, but we are going to learn 5 of these ways, the 5 ways that I believe are more common and easier to put in practice during our games. So in this position, Black played the move Bishop to b7. Bishop b7 is definitely bringing the bishop to the big diagonal, and the bishop is quite powerful here. There is, well, different ways we can react here with white, and I know that a very normal way of playing this position will be simply playing something like short castle and then try to bring bishop to d2, rook to d1, and slowly just develop the pieces. But the truth is, by doing that, we are not gaining space, we don't have lovely squares for our pieces, and also black pieces have some freedom right now for them. Instead, the best way to play this position is by applying the first concept on this course, which is called the diagonal barrier. We simply want to build a wall like this, f3. Putting a pawn on a diagonal defended by other pawn simply close the diagonal forever, and now this bishop is not going to manage to make any more damage on us. After something like knight bd7, we can continue with e4. Just by doing this, we can very quickly realize many things. We've gained space, we've gained a lovely square for our bishop on e3, now this bishop on b7 has no squares, and this guy on f6 also has not so many nice squares. Just very nice, very simple concept, restricting our opponent pieces, winning space, and also managing to bring new squares for our pieces. We're going to see the next sample where something very similar is going to happen. Here we are black, and well, we can see the position, very complex position. White has the pair of bishop, there is a possible weakness on c4, also a possible weakness here on a2, and also for us, we have to, well, at least be a bit careful with a possible weakness on g7. And actually, White played the move h3. White idea is to play g4, g5, try to free the whole diagonal, and try to start creating some threats on our king also. Maybe at some point he wants to start pushing the f-pawn. We of course don't have any dark squares bishop, so we have to be especially careful with these dark squares. The best way to play for black is extremely instructive. There is a way to basically build somehow a fortress, so all of our pieces are looking at the right spots, we have no weakness anymore, and black will have very hard to continue with his attack. The best way to play here, again, is building a diagonal barrier. We want to move this knight for this, and we want to play f6. We would love to play something like knight d7, f6, knight e5, this will be lovely, but actually chess is not so nice always, and now after knight d5, g7 will be hanging, we could defend it, but then knight c7, and we'll be losing some material. Of course, we cannot take the knight because queen g7 will be simply made. So what is the best way to play here for black? Rook e d8. The idea of rook e d8, it has two different ideas. The first one, and probably the most obvious one, is just we're defending the d6 pawn, which might be a weakness in the future. Also, well, at some point we can even think about some d5, but especially we're letting free this square for the knight. After g4, black simply played the move knight e8, something like f4 might happen, and simply f6. Just by doing this, we managed to close the whole diagonal, we've managed to bring another square for our bishop so it can keep putting some pressure on c4, and also now we have very simple plans that continue with some rook a3, rook a8. By putting pressure on a2, we also manage that this guy cannot move, and if this guy cannot move, this guy will be all the time well, crashing with him, so it's basically not gonna be able to unleash the power. So we managed to somehow restrict all the white position, and now we have a very simple plan to continue. Diagonal barrier, very simple. Just build a wall with your pawns to close the most annoying diagonal for your opponent bishop. Here we have next concept, and now we are going to learn how to use defense. Basically, defense is going to be built against some knight that usually is going to be placed on f6, f3, c6, c3, or sometimes even on g6. The idea again is very simple. We want to restrict this guy. This guy has many jumps. How to kill the jumps? Very simple, just by doing this. Putting a pawn on f3, as easy as that, is definitely gonna make the knight to have much less jumps, and in general it's going to be much more annoyed. If we compare this position with something like here, by us playing knight c3, now we are putting our knight in a square that it doesn't really have so many jumps, so in general this is a square we want to avoid. We would like to have the knight probably on c4, where it will have nicer jumps and basically a more annoying position for our opponent. But the knight on c3 has no jumps, has no danger, and actually it's going to even be easier in the future to put some pressure on the knight for our opponent. By playing knight fd2 first, g6 and f3, knight is already killed on f6. Continue the game with bishop g7 and now a4. We've gained some space, castle, simply c3, knight bd7, and after knight b3, white continue with knight a3, knight c4. White has some nice knight, and here we can see that the bishop is killed by the pawn. This guy has, again, not so many squares. Our plan is very easy. Bishop e3, king c2, nice diagonal for the bishop, good pressure with the pawn, some nice spot on c4 for our knight. So all of our pieces actually have a great coordination, and black pieces somehow are restricted again by our pawns. We're going to check the next sample, and this is a very well-known position. It happened in Caruana Carlsen, in Bachir Carlsen, in Kanyakin Carlsen, in Carlsen Gelfand. So Carlsen played a lot this position, especially with black. And the best plan for white, again, is to try to put defense against this guy on g6. But this, in this way, is not the normal fence, but it's an extended fence, because we want to play the move h4. By playing h4, basically we're threatening to play h5, so this guy will not have so many nice squares, right? So black move usually is h5. The problem with black playing h5 is that since there is a knight on g6, the pawn here can be weak in the future. So now white is simply going to play like this: bishop e3, b6, bishop e2, bishop e7, and g3. Just by doing this, we've managed two different things. First thing is very obvious. There is a guy here on h5 that has to be defended, so it's not so easy for black to castle. Of course, black can castle, he can sacrifice the pawn. There might be even some ways that he will get some nice compensation by doing that, but in general, you have to be very careful with the pawn, which is very annoying, and sometimes you'll simply need to lose some tempos by playing knight f8 and g6, something like that, to be able to castle. And also, we've managed to basically kill the moves for this knight. There is no jump here, no jump here, no jump anywhere. So the idea is basically that. You play h4, you try to force your opponent to play h5, now h5 will be a weakness, then you play g3, knight has no jumps, and then you just keep playing your position normally, with somehow you manage to freeze all of that for black, right? Next sample also happened in this kind of Spanish positions, where best move for white is to play a4. After a4, white has to be has to be quite careful. You always, I mean, a move like queen d7, you always have these a5 ideas, and suddenly the knight doesn't have so many jumps. So usually black will come back to knight b6, and again the same idea. We play b3, again the knight doesn't have so many jumps. Something like bishop c8, trying to, well, relocate the pieces will be normal. And then we're simply going to play queen e2 and c4. Again, by doing this kind of setup against a knight on b6, the knight has no jumps anymore. And, well, the game continues with b4. Now all of this is closed, and we can bring all of our pieces to the other part of the board. Knight d2, knight f1, something like g4, knight g3. And actually white has a nice, very nice advantage in this kind of position. This, by the way, was Kasparov against Grishchuk in 2001. Now we are going to learn the next concept of the course, which is called the triangle against the rook. In any position that there is a semi-open file, like this one right here, or like this one right here, but especially we're going to focus now on this one, the best way to basically kill all the power of the rook that is going to be placed in that semi-open file is very similar concept to the diagonal barrier. We want to place our pawn on b3. So this position, for instance, continue like that. c6, bishop f4. Also the bishop here is quite annoying because it's controlling the square for the rook. So usually black try to change it. Rook f1, something like bishop e6, and now usually white plans to play knight e2, bring the knight to these squares, rook b8, and the key is to play b3. So the truth is, the rook on b8 doesn't have so much power, black has this kind of weak pawns, and in general, this is a slightly more comfortable position to play for white. It's very close to equal, to be honest, but it's slightly more comfortable to play for white, and actually we've been seeing Nakamura to play this kind of position very recently with quite good results in general for him. But actually, what I wanted to tell you, and the most important thing, is that by doing this, we cut all the power from this rook on b8. If we compare this position, for instance, with this position, it's very similar, it's almost the same. We only change one thing. The pawn is not on e2, now it's on a4. This apparently very small change makes a huge difference for the position, and now the position is completely equal. Why? Where? We're going to see that if we play the same way, rook e1, something like bishop e6, knight e2, something like rook b8, and b3, now there is a problem. It's much easier for black to try to break on c4 and open the file and make the rook on b8 work. So now after something like, let's say, bishop f4, knight f4, and queen d6, black will continue with c5, c4. We are going to move the bishop. He's going to take. We are going to have a weakness on b3. If we take on c4, he's going to take back. And in general, black is going to be quite fine. If we had the pawn on a2, we had no problem with this, because if you ever take on b3, we simply take with the a pawn, and the position will be automatically equal. And of course, I couldn't finish this chapter without commentating one of my favorite games ever, when we are talking about restricting pieces with pawns. We are going to talk about a very, very important concept, which is called the prisoner bishop. This game was played by Capablanca so many years ago, and he completely understood the concept in the best possible way. In this position, white is trying to take on f6 and make our whole structure a disaster, so Capablanca played the move g5. Well, it's important to calculate that white can't really take on g5, because after knight d5, we're simply attacking now g5 with the queen. We're going to be able to take back, and we are going to have a huge advantage. So white simply take on f6, queen f6, and bishop g3. So in this position, we can see that we have the pair of bishop, we can see that we have double pawns, we can see that we have some weakness on our king. So it's somehow a complicated and balanced position, but Capablanca understood the position just insanely good, and he played the move bishop to g4. The idea of bishop g4 actually is not so obvious, but he simply wants to take on f3, and after queen f3, and gf3, we can simply think we have some endgame that is probably close to equal, but the truth is that this position is very close to be dead loss for white. Why? Because this guy is a prisoner and will be a prisoner for the rest of the game. There is no way of getting this bishop out from g3. This will be crashing here, no way here, no way here, no way here. This bishop is prisoner there on g3 forever. And the way Capablanca played, he just suddenly focused on the other part of the board, he opened the other part of the board, and we're going to see how the bishop is unable to move from g3 in the whole game. Play f6, king g2, a5, started to gain some space the queen side, a4, king f7, rook h1. He wants to open with h4. We're not worried by that. h4, we can simply ignore that, and rook b8. Capablanca knows he wants to play b5. He knows this guy will never be weak. You can always play bishop b7. So white took on g5, ace take g5, and this guy still a prisoner, forever a prisoner. If we play in this side of the board, we are simply playing with a piece up, which is this bishop on d6. b3 from white, c6. We simply want to break with b5 and then play c4, opening up the whole position. It doesn't matter if we even sacrifice a pawn, because we are going to be playing with a piece up on that part of the board. Game continue with rook a2, b5, rook h1, and c4. And as I said, it's not important that we are sacrificing a pawn. White could take it, something like bc4, bc4, dc4, we don't care. Rook b4, take, then the bishop comes, and again, this guy is never able to go anywhere just because of this guy here. If we actually manage to somehow forget about this guy and put it on e2, position will be completely fine for white. But the key is that the bishop can never go out. White played a b5, Capablanca took on b3, took here on b5, and again, this pawn might be weak, not important. I can defend it very easily with the bishop, you cannot do the same yourself. Rook a4, Capablanca took on b3, d4, trying to free the bishop finally, but you lost a pawn on the way. And after rook b5, the truth is that if you take, I take back. It's true that this guy is a bit weak, or weaker now, but it's not even easy for you to attack it. I can always defend it, and in the meantime, I will start advancing my pawns. White played rook c4, and simply rook b4. Took on c6, took on d4, and the position is simply dead loss. a4, a3, pawn defended, everything defended, and the key is that this guy was here now, and this guy was here just from this move. He understood that if he take here, these pawns will always keep the bishop on g3. He will never be able to break through that, and this was basically the whole point of the game. So in any position that you can manage to put your opponent bishop in some place that can never go out from that, just focus on the other part of the board, and something very similar to this game will happen. I hope you enjoyed the first 5 concepts on the course, and see you on chapter number 2.
Access Chess Enigma's free sample lessons. Enjoy videos, interactive exercises, and a digital board to practice anywhere on any device. Sign up for free and start improving your chess from home today.